Welcome to Module 5 of Police and Gang Interdiction. This is an exciting module because we start to look at the work directly of Michael Chettleberg. Michael Chettleberg wrote a book called Young Thugs. We only look at one chapter of his book, but it's the chapter that deals with police. And he talks about us on the front lines. He's very critical of how we might progress in the next few years dealing with this phenomenon of gangs. And he wants us to be clear that we should look to the United States for their successes and failures. He talks about suppression, prevention, diversion, intervention, and community mobilization. And of course, we as police primarily fall into the area of suppression. Justice. In 2001, $11 billion was spent in Canada on the justice system. $7 billion of that went to police. $2.5 went to corrections, and the rest to prosecution, courts, and legal aid. Let's talk about police. It's important for our discussion during this module because Chettleberg talks about police and the role that we play in this issue of gangs. In 2005, there's just under 85,000 Canadians employed by a police agency, with just over 61,000 of them being police officers. So in Canada, we have one sworn police officer for every 528 Canadians. Michael Chettleberg wants to clearly define the differences between different types of police who deal with gangs. His first is the detectives. These police officers respond post-event. Homicide detectives, robbery detectives, assault detectives. They respond to the post-incident event. Then he talks about the specialists, the gang cops, the gang hunters, the suppression unit, the intelligence gatherers. And finally, he talks about patrol officers. He talks specifically about the role that they can play in dealing with first responders to gang incidents. It's my hope through this course that we, while we're not doing a who course, we're doing a why course, and that our officers are better prepared to answer the questions about why gang violence is occurring on our streets. Now, many of you know that crime reduction strategies for police was a prerequisite course for this. This is probably the main slide why it's prerequisite, because Michael Chettleberg takes a real run at broken windows theory. He's concerned about how it's been used as a panacea for crime. He talks about doctor killing and specifically broken windows in a building left unrepaired. All the rest of the windows will soon be broken. No one cares, so breaking other windows has no consequence. Therefore, for killing, he talks about fixing antisocial behavior will have a positive impact on major crimes. For those of you who have forgotten, Dr. Killing is the doctor who is an academic criminologist who provided a consulting service to Bill Bratton when he first became the commissioner of the New York Police Department, and specifically before that, the New York Transit Authority. Killing's research is based on former research done by Dr. Zimbardo. Dr. Zimbardo parked two similar cars, one in the Bronx in New York City and another in Palo Alto, California. The car in the Bronx had no license plate and the hood was popped open as if it was in need of service. Within a day, that car was completely stripped. The car in Palo Alto remained untouched for an entire week until he smashed a window. He smashed one window, and within a few hours of that car, although it had been there for a week untouched, was completely destroyed. This was the premise behind broken windows theory. I talked about Dr. Killing, how he's hired as a consultant, and between 1984 to 1990, $250 million was spent on the New York Transit Authority subway system to remove graffiti. Chief Bratton took over, and he went after fare evaders and warrant arrests, and crime plummeted on a transit system that people had feared to use. Now you might be wondering, why are we talking about broken windows theory? Chettleberg is very concerned that we're going to take the same principles of broken windows theory and zero tolerance or strict enforcement policing and apply it to gangs. And he's concerned that for Canada, that would be a significant poor choice. A decade later, there's 40,000 police officers in New York. They had a 45% increase in strength in 10 years. and they resulted in 1 police officer for every 202 persons. They had a 50% reduction in violent crime, a 74% reduction in murders, and they clearly were the safest big city in America. Now, Schellenberg says there's lots of critics to that. Similar reduction occurred in San Francisco, and they had no broken windows theory and no additional police officers. The use of crack cocaine declined, and supply and demand issues within the drug trade resulted in many leaving the business. The margin of profit had decreased. Once again, the reason why we're talking about broken windows theory is Schellenberg is very concerned that we're going to go down this road of broken windows, zero tolerance policing, and that is a huge mistake. The gangster laws that are in our place in the Criminal Code of Canada are Section 467. Let's take a moment of how the Criminal Code of Canada defines a criminal organization. 3 or more persons that has as its main purpose the facilitation or commission of a serious offense that results in direct or indirect receipt of benefits, including money by the group or by any of the persons who belong to the group. That's a criminal organization as defined by the Criminal Code of Canada. The Criminal Code of Canada also sets out 3 different groups of people that could be charged. The sympathizers. These are people who act in support or facilitate or enhance the gang. They can be convicted of an indictable offense and spend up to 5 years in prison. Participants. These are people who actually commit the offense for the benefit or direction of the association, the gang. They can receive up to 14 years. And finally, the leaders. They instruct any person to commit a crime in the name of the gang. They can face life imprisonment. So, when people say that the law is too soft on gangsters, the law does exist that has fairly real consequences for participation in gang activity or particularly gang crime. Schellenberg wants to talk about crime prevention, and he talks about the police should be barriers to the criminal justice system and that law enforcement should not be our end result. We should be doing things in the community. He gives a great example in the reading about a police officer working in a more of a social work environment, leading a youth group in a high crime gang area. For Schellenberg, he looks simply at the numbers. $76,000 to keep somebody in a medium security prison. That works out for 5 years, that works out to $380,000 that could have been better spent in his estimation through rehabilitation, counseling, and or job training. Will prison reform this person, or will they simply come out a better criminal? In order to reach police officers with his message, Schellenberg has partnered with LAPD gang expert Tony Marino. And Tony Marino talks about working gangs and how he likes to work gangs. He says it's important to have a measured, intelligent, and patient approach. You got to get to know the gang, get to know the members. Who are they related to? Who's their family? Who's their friends? Who's their girlfriends? What are their nicknames? Who's their enemies? What intelligence gathering can we have in conversations with these people? Marino also sees his role as being non-confrontational with gangs. He's low-key and calm, shows a mutual respect, and sees the role of the police as prevention as well as suppression. Interestingly, Marino is the real-life character that was used by Hollywood in the movie Colors, and he was the person that the name Pac-Man came from, played by Sean Penn. I hope you enjoyed reading this particular chapter. Schellenberg gives us a different perspective than what we may have received from crime reduction, but it's an equally compelling perspective when we start to look at how we as police officers are going to be part of the debate on how we combat gang violence in our country in the next few years. Thank you very much.